Okay, there are lots of good books and good videos out there. We're working on revising the SCA College of Heralds education on site on Armory and names and everything else. And this class is maybe set in that direction. Katerina, what are you helping to get out of this?
I was hoping for you not to call on me.
Well,
I was way across the room when you asked that question.
No, it's helpful to me if I know what it is that you want out of the class.
No, just more on Armory. I have, let's see, I took Ivo's class, and I went to the Herald's, oh gosh, symposium. I can't remember the word, but
It's your heraldic and scribal symposium.
That's it. I was there.
EHSS.
Okay, cool. I was the Herald of Wildwood for a time until they needed a new exchequer, and now I'm in the exchequer. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
now you find out how money inefficient heralds are, which is why money was taken out of their hands and put in the hands of the exchequer.
Right. So, but yeah, that's an important relationship, and I do understand it. I enjoyed heraldry a whole lot more, and I still do.
Yeah. It's always nice to have a side hobby.
Right. But that's my goal. I love Armory. Onomastics, nope. As far as I get into onomastics is knowing how to say that word. That is it.
That word. As I tell people that consult and realize, if you don't want people to mispronounce your name, don't do something other than English.
Right.
Says the person who is mispronouncing his own name for about 40 years.
Well, and they need to come up with names that are solidly in one culture, because right now we've had the Ansteora thing forever, but now we have Vindheim or Vindheim. I don't know, but I'm a herald.
Potato.
Right? That's my excuse. I'm a herald. I'm going to butcher a name, and I don't care whose it is.
Have you been escorted off the field before?
No, but I have been approached and told, this is how you say my name. And I'm like, great, that's how I'll say it then. That's all I ask is say your name.
Yeah, William Meska the Bear, I mispronounced his name so badly, he literally escorted me off the field my first time field heraldry.
Yeah, this was, oh, darn it. Now all I can remember is his last name, Shada, which is what I was mispronouncing as Sade. Like, but it's Shada. Like, and I told him, okay, I shudder to think what you will do to me if I mispronounce this again. Great mnemonic. So I wish that had.
It's really helpful when the list mistress or minister of the list writes down pronunciations for you. Excuse me.
And the thing is, when they are doing their sign up for the list, most of the time they're the ones writing out the card. And so I'll tell them, hey, if you're going to be signing up for the list, why don't you go ahead and add the phonetic spelling of your name so that your herald will call it correctly and you won't get irked and no one will get upset and everything will be great. They don't always do that.
Yeah, well.
I'd like to interject, having an English name is no guarantee that you or heralds will actually pronounce it correctly, because my own name is very much English, and I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing my by name correctly.
Which is?
Jesmond of Emmerich's Kep or Emmerich's Keppa, because the E is on the end. So do you say the E on the end, or do we say Emmerich's Keep?
Whatever you want.
Yeah, I would pronounce a keep. I've only heard it ever pronounced as keep.
Yeah.
That's how we've always pronounced it. Yeah, like a keep, because we have a tower, the castle, the keep. And that was our thought. But then I'm like, So with a lot of pronunciation, I guess all that really matters is how that person wants to pronounce their name, because if you are from a different culture, your culture would maybe pronounce that name differently, or even within time period, they're pronounced different. Husband is Tobias, and I say Tobias. Modernly, everybody says Tobias.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will tell
They're
you
not
this.
wrong.
The Shire of Smithkeep in Glenavon, now they say it keep, and it's Kepe at the end, so it's Smithkeep. So, I mean, there's you some backup for your pronunciation.
Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're right either. It's,
No,
you
it
know,
doesn't.
it's subjective.
It does
It's
not.
subjective.
But, okay, let's go with a modern example. The state of Nevada. The people in Nevada say Nevada. However, that is a Spanish word, and it is pronounced properly as Nevada. But they don't want to say it that way, so they don't. So I say, you say it however you want.
Precisely.
And if push comes to shove, check the OED
But yeah,
and see
let
what ones that
yourself
they have
be the
with.
final authority.
Tostig, you need,
Hi.
I would say, go ahead and get started. Senna just joined.
Hi, Senna. Oh, okay. We have the recording sign. This class is going to be recorded. If you do not wish to be seen on screen, please blank your screen. I'm going to be doing the same, but mine's only because I am doing the slide presentation, and it's much easier seeing what I'm saying than listening to me. Welcome everybody for the first class of King's College this year. I hope you enjoy yourselves. Let's get started.
I was just popping in to make sure everything was going great. So I will check on the recording afterwards. Have a great night.
Okay. Thank you, Senna. You have a blessed one. Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This is SCA Armory conflict rules, giving historical examples. Class is a partial illustration of most of the rules for Armory Uniqueness in the SCA. They're based on examples taken from, why is that showing? Okay. Based on examples taken from British historical records of the early, high, and late Middle Ages, as recorded in the 4-volume work, Dictionary of British Arms, Medieval Arms, and the Dictionary of Heraldry, a few clothes bars and pedigrees by Joseph Foster. Sir Anthony Wagner, cannot remember what his title was, is actually a professional herald. Joseph Foster was a gifted amateur who was quite frequently derided by people, but his works is actually fairly decent. The compilations of these two sources come from 4 different types of primary sources. First are the word descriptions, otherwise known as blazons. These are heraldic lists from different events, such as the Siege of Calais, or compiled heraldic ordinary, such as William's Ordinary. Then there are what were known as emblazons, where it's primarily pictures only. We very rarely have the two of them together, where we have both the blazon and the emblazon. Emblazons is heraldic roll, such as the Seeger's roll. And then in the British dictionary, we do a bunch of heraldic artifacts, such as things, glass windows, and effigies in various compilations. The general outline of class is to briefly go over the heraldic concepts and the meta terms. This includes what the SCA refers to as charge group theory, which is their take on what the actual heraldry was in the Middle Ages, primarily in British-centric and French-centric Europe. We'll be talking about the different aspects of charges that are actually used as far as conflict is concerned. Then we'll be talking about the heraldic goals and the rules. After that, we'll be talking about what heraldic cadency was in the Middle Ages. Then we're actually going to go into the actual historical illustrations of all the rules that we're going to be discussing. I will not be able to see the comment section. The moderator is going to be keeping on top of that, but we are going to have a planned time for questions following each included topic. Everybody ready to begin? SCA charge group theory. The SCA divides the things that you see on a heraldic shield into several different things. First thing is the field. This is the background for there. After that, there is a group of heraldic charges that occupies centrally around the middle of the field. And this is known as the primary charge or the primary charge group if there's more than one. It is possible to have a charge that lies on both the field and over the primary charge. And when this happens, this is called an overall charge. So we have the background field, central primary, and over both of them could be an overall. SCA also classifies what they call secondary charges. This is a charge or a group of charges that goes around the central primary charge. If it goes around the shape of the field, it's called a peripheral charge. And if they're discrete charges in a set pattern in order to fill the space, I'm referring to them as arranged charges. There's also another type called tertiary charges. These are a charge that is placed totally on another charge. In the overall charge, we replaced over the field. When a tertiary charge, you place it entirely on the primary charge or charges, totally on the secondary charge or charges, or totally on the overall charge. Are there any questions about charge group theory? Everything clear as mud?
You're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go into the different aspects of charges. There are 5 types of things that can change as far as heraldry is concerned in talking about the difference between different heraldic arms. There is the type of the charge, there's the tinctures, there is number, there is arrangement, and there's posture or orientation. For type, the most common type of charge used in the Middle Ages was basically something going through the middle of the field, frequently in a straight line, and the ends were determined by the shape of the heraldic display. These count for over 50% of all the arms in the Middle Ages. Another type is what's called a subordinary. This is something that subordinaries are also normally straight line-ish type figures that go around one portion, either on the top, such as the chief, and it's the outer edge that's determined by the shape of the device. And then we have different types of discrete charges. Now, there are just literally hundreds of different types of charges. You could have a specific thing like a lion, which is categorized as a type of beast, an isotoil, a rose is a specific type of flower, hundreds and hundreds of different things and critters. We also have the tincture of charges and the field. Heraldry has a very, very limited color palette. Basically, the primary colors, red, blue, black, sometimes green, rarely purple because the dye was really expensive, white, yellow, and they also did have 2 types of furs that were used. There was the ermine field, which you notice is very, very light color, similar to the argent. And then they also had a firm where squirrel pelts were done together, and it was called vair. Now, something can be more than one type of tincture at the same time if you divide it evenly. So if it's divided directly across the middle, we call that profess. Dividing it in this shape of a triangle, it's called per chevron. Straight up and down, left and right is per pale, and dividing into 4 even parts is quarterly. And if you notice, it's this upper left and lower right match together, upper right, lower left match together. There are also other types of ones, but basically it divides it into 2 different even types of field. The line does not have to be straight. A very common way to change the line was known as indented, or in a wavy type form called engrailed. You could have straight lines going up and down, such as embattled, and then curved lines, such as wavy. Charges also have the aspect of number, And as far as the SCA's rulings are concerned, there are only 4 types of numbers to count. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's a lot. Yes, people can count higher. People in the Middle Ages did count higher. They counted as high as 14. But as far as heraldic difference is concerned, it's 1, 2, 3, or more than 3. Now, charges can also be arranged. For example, if you had 3 cups, the SCA concept of filling the space, 3 cups would best fill the space when arranged in this sort of V pattern. 3 anvils, which are long charges, best fill the space if they go up and down. Square type things, it best fills the space, again, in this V pattern. But you don't necessarily have to fill out the space as long as it's done in a symmetric order. For example, you could have 3 cups going straight up and down, a thing called pale. The anvils could be along the diagonal, called a bend. The soils could be straight across in a configuration called infest. But notice when you do this, identification sort of really goes down because you have to draw them much, much smaller to do the straight line. And identifiability is greatly reduced. It's not often done, but it is done. We also have what's called posture or orientation. If it's an animate charge, it talks about the head and the way the spine is done. So with the spine straight up and down and the head at the top, you would have, say, a fighting lion, an eagle displayed, or a fish horient, which means coming up for air. And if it's an object, you just simply say that the object is pale-wise. With the head going primarily to the left, with the spine straight, you could have a walking lion, a running lion, a standing lion. A bird in this posture would actually be flying, known as volant. Fish would be swimming or naiant. And then if you had an object, it would be blazoned simply as fess-wise. And there's also a third type of posture where the head is in the upper left and the spine goes diagonally. This is primarily done for sitting type things. So a beast sitting, a bird perching, or an object that goes bendwise. These are the 5 types of things that we're going to be talking about with what the difference is. We have differences in color, difference in the types of charges, difference in the numbers of charges, difference in the arrangement, or differences in the posture or orientation. Are there any questions about these basic concepts? I haven't lost anybody yet. Wow. Okay. I have a link in the comment section that actually has the slide presentation because nobody really wants to hear me read. The SCA heraldry mandate is taken from the governing documents of the SCA Corpora, and heraldry is the only thing that's talked about that actually requires a uniform set of rules for everybody rather than just standardized rules for martials, for the various martial arts. There are no rules except for attempt to be period form as far as the arts and sciences are concerned. But it does say that we have to have a uniform standard in order to apply to heraldic submissions, and that members are encouraged to develop unique, historically valid names in armory. To answer this mandate, the latest version of the rules is known as SCA, which is an acronym for the Standards for the Evaluation of Names in Armory, the Rules of Submission, and is written to support these historical recreations of the society. They are to be used uniformly to rule whether heraldic submissions are unique and historically valid. Historically valid, we were talking about before, is what the different aspects of the charges and the core theories. This class is primarily going to be concentrating on the word unique. More boring stuff. Important line. The first thing to avoid confusion on is confusion of identity. These are 2 devices where the visual similarity, and heraldic equivalency. Things look a lot different to the modern eye than they did to the period eye. We'll be going through a couple of examples on that one. The things that we think are different are not necessarily considered to be different in the Middle Ages. When we have the idea of visual heraldic equivalency, in essence, what we're talking about is that the armory is exactly the same thing as something that is slightly different to the modern eye, but is the same as far as the period eye is concerned. The second type of confusion is the confusion of relationship. This is arms that are different. People in the Middle Ages said they were different, but it was a type of difference that was used from parent to child. And when that occurred, we almost always consider one to be related to the other. So the idea is to design armory that does not have this particular concept of confused relationship. The things that were used in the Middle Ages were known as cadency, and it's very, very complex, and it changes over time, and it changes over place, and sometimes it actually changed within families at the same time and place as different people came into rule. For example, something with confusion of identity, where we had absolutely no difference of all. We had, for in the case of Richard Sutton, if you notice, this lion has this nice little twisty little tail on him. And that was done in the parliamentary roll, but in the Surrey roll, the lion didn't have a twisted tail. As a result, we were able to tell that this was considered to be absolutely no difference. It was identified as the same person, even though it's a slightly blazonable detail. Same thing is true with head posture. In the case of plays, in one case, the lion is walking across the field and the head is pointed straight at you, like the lions of England. In the nobility roll, walking forward and the lion is facing straight forward. This happens so frequently, we know that the direction of the head made absolutely no difference. It was blazonable only and frequently meant exactly the same person. Similar things are true as far as putting crowns on top of the head or around the neck. We have cases where we have, as in the case of Louvain and the Camden and the Howard rolls, the same lion, everything's the same. The only difference is the crown of the lion. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, sometimes it changes colors. There are also different heraldic charges with minor differences to the modern eye, but no difference at all as far as the period eye is concerned. For example, we have these types of crosses. We've noticed this one has a long, sharp, jagged point in the end for sticking in the ground, or this type of cross called a crosslet. Invariably in different roles, people had either this type of cross or this type of cross, meaning for exactly the same person. As a result, this is a blazonable only difference, and we have a confusion of identity because as far as the Middle Ages are concerned, these two things were identical. Before, when we were talking about the straight lines, and I was talking about the indented line and the engrailed line. Well, it turns out in the Middle Ages, these two are considered precisely the same thing. They have come to a point, and one just connects it with a curve, whereas one connects it with straight lines. So in the Middle Ages, there is no difference at all between engrailed and indented, even though in the modern eye, the answer is obvious to us, but did not happen during the Middle Ages. There are several other types of things where this happened, where things were pierced, such as a star or a star with a hole in the middle of it, a flower or a flower with a hole in the middle of it. Dogs, wolves, and foxes were all considered to be the same type of animal because we had people that had one and the same person had, say, a dog, and then the other person had a fox, and some had a fox and a wolf. As a result, this and a couple of other things are considered identical. Are there any questions about confusion of identity and things that are blazonable only?
Yes, I have a
Well,
quick question, please. When you
yes,
mentioned the crown being added and was really unblazonable, to my understanding, that could also be if the crown was on the top of the head or the neck, which I believe you said, but also collars or collars with chains, that they would often be depicted in different roles with or without the collar, with or without the chain. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Thank you.
And you also had things like sometimes they were wounded and things like that. Okay. No other questions? Okay. Let's talk about cadency. There are two types of things that we're talking about when we're talking about cadency. The first is cadency marks. These were things that were done on Armory that indicated a specific close family relationship to a living relative. In particular, it was your parent, your child, or your immediate brother. Cadency differences, on the other hand, developed when a son or a brother became knighted and were entitled to wear arms of their own. They followed the style of cadency marks, and the essence was that it was the idea of the renown of the family as opposed to the renown of the individual. I understand that in the current Middle Ages, we're highly stressing the names of the individual, but in the Middle Ages, this was not the case. We were talking about family. And this is the reason why we have to have the Armory Uniqueness as far as understanding what they did to distinguish what it is that we can do. For example, in the cases of Percy, these were the arms of the senior Henry Percy. His eldest son, Pierce, had this type of mark. It was called a heraldic label. His younger son, Rafe, had a star or a mullet on the shoulder. And Henry's younger brother, William, had a Borgia engraved. Now, in this particular case, this tincture is red, this tincture is yellow, this tincture is red, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. They could have been any tincture. In the Seagraves, further on to the south, you had John Seagrave with the lion wearing a crown. His oldest son, John, also called John, had a red label. His younger son, Stephen, had a fleur-de-lis on the shoulder like Percy did with the mullet. And then they also had what we call a bend or a baton that went across the middle to indicate another type of relationship. I actually didn't find out what this specific relationships were. But again, notice the colors didn't change. The idea of cadency marks was they added something to it, one thing and one thing only, and they could have put it in a variety of places, and they could use a variety of tinctures. So the cadency marks was primarily the label for the oldest son. Second son was crescent. Third was a mullet. Fourth was martlet. Also the annulet. On occasion, depending on region, you could have added a bordure, the baton, bend or bendlet, or in some rare cases, they had something that was called canton, a subordinary that came out of the side of the shield. They could have been placed anywhere on the device with the marks, but they normally occurred in the top, particularly in the top left, although there were some seen in the top right, and they could have been placed anywhere on a primary charge. They were placed upon another charge. Are there any questions about cadency marks, cadency differences, the types of things that they were doing with it? Nope. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Reduce you. And let's continue on. First, let's talk about types of things that did not, or that did occur in the Middle Ages that the SCA College of Heralds is ignoring. One of the very earliest, most common forms of cadencing, difference cadencing, was complete reversal of tincture. The senior, for example, could have a red background with a yellow lion, and his son I'm sorry, actually, this was the senior one. John had yellow with a red lion. His son, when he became knighted at the Siege of Calais, took these arms and simply reversed the colors. So you notice we changed the tincture of the background and the tincture of the primary charge. Similarly, with the Fitz Edmonds, we had the senior that had a blue background with a yellow eagle and a yellow chief, a blue fighting lion, and the son Reynard actually reversed them when he became knighted. So where it was blue, it became yellow, and where it was yellow, it became blue. The SCA did actually protect this type of cadency difference, but it became far, far too confusing for everybody to conflict as much as the registrations were going. And so they simply say, we're ignoring this one because this happened only in early heraldry, so we're not going to do it. A similar thing that happened that's not mentioned, but is in the book of heraldic cadency that the SCA is based on by Gare, was sometimes an ordinary is put in the middle of a set of charges, and this was actually a cadency difference. There's been others where there was an ordinary and the charges were put on the entire thing. So I don't have a drawing of that one, but you actually could have had a, say, a yellow background with a black bend and then 6 yellow annulets going up and down there like that. Again, this is something that did happen in the Middle Ages. Gare says it happens only in early heraldry, but I found examples throughout the entire Middle Ages. But it's something that was done that we're no longer saying is considered to be a cadency difference. And some of the really strange ones where we simply move charges from one spot to another. So, for example, in the case of Bulmer, we had these rectangles. They were scattered all in the around the primary charge, the secondary charge, and then the heir decided, no, I don't want them on the background. I want them on the lion. And since we don't want yellow on yellow, we changed them to black. So these two, everybody knew it was a cadency difference in the Middle Ages. Current Middle Ages, no, that's way too complicated to try and describe. We're just simply going to ignore it. It's something that happened in early heraldry. We've talked about things that we ignored. Now, these are the type of things that we do say were there. This is primarily an elaboration of SCA Section A, 5G, which talks about what cadency differences are. And they list 7 things, and they're based on the 5 aspects that we were talking about. The first one is changed solely to the aspect of the tincture of at least half the field. The second is talking about addition or removal of a non-primary charge group. In other words, secondary charge, an overall charge, or tertiary charges. Or we're talking about the 5 different aspects, changing the tincture within a charge group, the type within the charge group, the number within a non-primary charge group, arrangement within the charge group, and the posture orientation within a charge group of at least half the charges. Now, the rule says that these for at least half of the charges, but in period heraldry, there was very, very rarely more than one charge type in charge group. Yes, it did happen. It happens odd enough that we make a rules in order to deal with it. And it's something that is very, very popular in current Middle Ages because people like cramming as many things on their device as possible. Talk about distinct changes. Please forgive my mathematical indication out there. When we're talking about changing the tinctures of field, we're actually talking about several different things all at the same time. We can either change the tincture of the entire field. We could change the tincture of only half of it. We could add or remove a line of division. We could change the type of the line of division. We can change the numbers of the line of division. We can reverse the tinctures on the field, or we can make multiple changes all at the same time. So let's get examples of each of these. Changing the tincture of the entire field. In the case of Giffords, notice we had the same primary charge, two bars or 2 red lines with our fesses, a peripheral, which is the red chief, and a tertiary on the chief, which is a walking lion. Everything is the same, but the tincture, entire tincture of the background, changing from yellow to urban. This is a confusion of identity because this person is obviously directly related to that person. When we say that we have a conflict, that we only have one DC for change of tincture, this is the type of thing that we're talking about. This is a confusion of relationship, and we have to have a second change in order to make it clear. We can change the tincture to the half of the field. For example, in the case of Brute, we had a checky background with a red band. This was alternating white and blue, but an error was alternating white and black. This changed to half of the tincture of the field. That's the only change. We have a confusion of relationship. Herbert, original roll had a red background with 3 lions, and then an error said, okay, let's put a line down the middle. We'll keep half the red, but we're also going to do blue. This is probably to indicate property in both France and England, because the primary background color for England was red and the primary background color for France was blue. You could change the table lines of divisions. In the case of Bigod, started off as being divided down the middle, left and right, yellow and green, and then changing the type of line of division to quarterly. Upper left, lower right, yellow, upper right, lower left, green. Primary charge is the same. The only difference is the change to the line of division in the field. We have a confusion of relationship that this happens because this is a relationship that happened during the Middle Ages. We could do multiple numbers of lines of division. In the case of Thorpe, we had the fess with 3 martlets on it, and we changed it from quarterly to bunches of little quarters all put together in a form called checky. Everything is the same except for the number of lines of divisions. We could have total reversal tincture of the field. So for example, this is divided per bend, red and black, as opposed to this one, which is divided per bend, black and red. Everything else the same, the primary charge, the secondary charges around it, and the tertiary charge. And then we can do a whole bunch of different things all at the same time. In the case of Old Hall, we had a red background with an ermine lion, and then one error said, okay, we're going to divide it in 2. We're going to have it 2 different colors, and none of them are going to resemble the original one. To the modern eye, there is no way you would think you could confuse those 2 people. In the Middle Ages, yeah, we're the son of that person. This is a confusion of relationship. This, as a result, no matter how many changes you make to the tincture of a field, is only considered 1 DC under the current rules. Anybody want to be bored with statistics? I didn't think so. I actually, in going through 42, the 4 volumes to compile this, I went through recorded about 4,200 different instances which supported or denied the rules. 17% of those in the Middle Ages, the ones I recorded, did nothing but change the tincture to the field, and it breaks down as to which types of each one. Are there any questions about the confusion of relationship in regard to changes of tinctures on the field? Gita, I'm curious, what was the wow about? Oh, the variety of everything? Yes. And all of this is just one simple change to the background. But wait, there's more. We could have additional removal of a charge group. Now, this refers to the secondary charge group, either peripheral or range, the overall charge group, or a tertiary charge group, whether on the primary, the secondary, and the overall. You'll notice that I've got something in here mentioned talking about a maintaining charge group and a quaternary charge group. Quaternary charge groups are not something that's normally allowed in SCA core heraldry. And the SCA has had a love-hate relationship with maintained charges. I'm not including them in this lecture. That is something now actually occurs for a difference. And the types of things that it occurs difference on we'll be talking about, but I will not be giving any graphic examples. Jessamine, you can draw maintain charges. I hate doing it. I can't find graphics for them. Okay, adding and removing a charge group. Example of adding a secondary peripheral charge. In the case of Bell House, white, 3 red lions, an air, white, 3 red lions, and put it all within a bordure that's indented. Example of adding secondary arranged charges. Case of Dalton, blue background, white fighting lion, an air, blue background, white fighting lion with a scattered of yellow fleurs de lis. Obvious family relationship as far as the Middle Ages is concerned. Case of Bohun, you can have more than one secondary charge group. The senior at the Siege of Boroughbridge had a blue background with a white bend, and it was surrounded by 6 lions. And then heirs developed these thin little lines called codices on there. And this is a secondary charge group because it's arranged around the primary charge. This was not very frequently done in the Middle Ages. As a matter of fact, during the early Middle Ages, they weren't referred to codices, they were just simply referred to as Bohuns. We could have or add or change the overall charge. For in the case of Ardennes, green background, yellow lion, green background, yellow lion. And heir said, I'm an Ardennes. I'm not the same one. I have a red overall fess. Tertiary charge groups. For example, on the primary charge, Colville, Senior John had yellow background with a red fess. Heir, Thomas Colville, same background, but what we did is we added 3 fighting lions on top of it. Confusion of relationship if this is done in the SCA, because this is actual historical relationship in the Middle Ages. Putting tertiary charge group on a secondary charge. So for example, in the case of the Bruces, we had yellow background, red saltier, and a red chief. Senior had it blank. Later heirs had a walking lion on top of the chief. Or in even more complicated heraldry in the case of Brunel's, where you had white background, black fighting line, and overall a red bend. Just an heir came up with doing the same thing, but what we're going to do is on that red bend, we're going to put 3 white stars on it. Now, adding these tertiary charges occurred quite frequently. It happened about 27% of the cases. The secondary charges, if you notice, occurred for about 2/3 of it. And it was evenly split between the peripheral and the arranged charges. Overall charges, this is primarily bends and bastons. And to be honest with you, it is real difficult to tell when you're looking at a description as to whether or not that bend is supposed to be a cadency mark or a cadency difference. So almost all of them were included. So the actual number of historical instances is probably less than this. The primary thing to note on the adding of tertiary charges is that almost all of them were put on the primary charge groups. It happened putting on the secondary charge group, primarily borgiers and chiefs, and occasionally on overall charges. But notice these 2 instances were far less than actually putting it on the primary charge. Are there questions about the additional removal of a charge group? This is a confusion of identity with only one, where there's only one change. If the Armory, submitted Armory only has this one change, a second one needs to be made.
Good.
Okay, haven't lost anyone yet. Okay, now we're going to talk about changing one aspect of a charge group. Change the tincture of a charge group, either the primary, the 2 types of secondary charges, overall, or the 3 types of tertiary charge groups. And again, there's statistics on the maintain as well. Example of change is solely the tincture of the primary charge. peripheral charge, just simply changing this one. Again, we have relationship. Changing the tinctures of the secondary charges, just changing from blue to red. Changing the tincture of the overall charge, going from solid blue to alternating yellow and blue. Again, relationship with Pithane. Changing the tinctures of the tertiary charges on a primary charge, changing from yellow to white. Everything else is the same. Changing the tincture on a peripheral charge, feels the same. Changing the tincture from yellow to white. Changing the tincture on an overall charge, changing from white roses to yellow roses. Again, it's the only change. Anytime we had a change to a tincture within the charge group, this is obviously a relationship in the Middle Ages and happened about a little over a third of the time. Between the 35% for changing the tincture of a charge and the 15% of changing the tincture of the field, over half of the cadency in the Middle Ages involved a change to tincture. Even more if we talk about, include the numbers for the reversal tinctures that the SCA is totally ignoring. Are there any questions about changes to tincture within a charge group? Yes, everything we're talking about is considered 1DC. Sorry. Changing this tincture is 1DC. Changing this tincture is 1DC. Changing this tincture is 1DC. All of these are 1DCs. And G3 is the rule that says that it's only one change. Any questions? Okay. Going over to type as far as changing the type. Now, I'm not talking about another section of SCA which talks about primary charges in what they call substantial changes. As I said before, there are hundreds and hundreds of charges that were used in the Middle Ages. Some of these were blazonable only changes, such as we were talking about as far as dogs and foxes and wolves were concerned. Some were considered cadency changes, like changing from a lion to a half lion. There are other types of things where changing from a star to an S-stoil we're concerned. One has straight lines, the other has wavy lines, and there's only 5 arms in one and 6 arms in the other. To say where something is substantial change or something that wasn't done in cadence in the Middle Ages, or a cadency change following into the rules of G, these are handled by what are called precedents. A lot of them are established very early, and there is really no rhyme or reason or general rule you can say that these two things are absolutely substantial change because of this. It's all going to have to be taken very individually. And this is the reason why conflict checking is going to be so difficult. But we'll talk about some of the major types of things that are not considered substantial when we're talking about changes to the type in the primary charge group. It doesn't apply, but we're talking about changes to type in the secondary charge group. Again, both types, peripheral and arranged. Change the overall, change the 3 types of tertiary, primary, secondary, and on the overall. And there were also changes to type as far as maintain and quaternary charges are concerned. Now, the difference between this one is where we have the bend between 3 crosslets and then the bend engrailed. This is something that has been ruled to be a cadency difference under G4. Going from a bend to a pale is not considered a cadency change. It's called a substantial one. But most of the examples we're going to have are going to be something on this line where we have a straight line ordinary and then it changed to a different type of complex line. So in the case of booking, these are cadency difference because by precedent, this is one cadency difference from this. Most things that happen really aren't cadency differences. They're mostly substantial differences, such as going from a dog to a cat or a dog to an eagle. Then by, oops, yeah, I made a big mistake on this one. This is not a primary charge group, this is a secondary charge group. Here we had with the case of Cornwall, I've got several examples of Cornwall, where we have the crowned lion and a bordure with yellow circles on it, was called Byzance. And the cadency difference is again changing the type of line from straight to engrailed. This is one cadency difference, two are related. Changing the type in the secondary figures, again, we don't have to worry about the different types. So in the case of Ruth, same field, same primary charge, which is the chevron, because that's the middle. And we change from wolves' heads to lions' heads. Only difference is to change type in the arranged secondary charge group. These two people were related. If we only have this type of change in SCA Armory, a second DC needs to happen. Case of Skyward, please forgive my terrible diagram on this one. I finished the research up 2 weeks ago and did not spend as much time as I could on all the graphics. In the case of Skyward, we had a white background with the red fighting lion. And in one instance, they had a bend called Raguli, and that actually should be a much smaller bend than was drawn there. Or in this case, a ragged staff on that one. And this one, to increase identifiability, the staff is probably much narrower in the original diagram. But again, the only change was the change to the type of the overall charge. Changing the type within the tertiary and a primary charge. In this case, a white ermine flower as opposed to an ermine rectile is the only difference. Changing from fleurs de lis to stars in the case of Clinton, or on the overall, going back to Cornwell, changing from 3 yellow stars to 3 yellow circles. And this actually only happened about 15% of the time. Are there any questions of the type of change within a charge group? All these have a confusion of relationship, but this is the only type of change that is made, whether the change to the primary, the secondaries, the overall, or the tertiary. I'm sorry, Rhiannon, were there any? Okay, thank you, Gita. Okay, next one, 5.
My
Talking
hand's
to.
up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes,
No, I
Katarina.
was just got a comment. I just want to say that this excites me because when somebody comes to me and I'm consulting with them on their arms and they find out that this is going to conflict with somebody else, this helps me in helping them because I can say, look, we can make 2 small changes here. Change this ordinary or change this type of line, and then also maybe change this charge. And it can still basically be the same as what they wanted, and yet it creates enough of a difference that it will go through. And I find that exciting.
And I'm hoping the historical aspect, since what the SCA says is that these are based on historical records, is rather than the necessarily trademark copyright law that SANA is in giving their complex examples, I'm hoping more historical examples will make it much easier for a submitter or a consulting herald to understand as to why the rules are what they are. Is this doing that?
I'd say absolutely, yes. Because
Okay.
if you, as a consulting herald, if I understand it clearly enough, then I can explain it, but even more importantly, help, let's just be frank, calm somebody down because folks get really excited and then they get shot down because of a conflict or say a rule of tincture even, and
Mhm.
it just can really discourage someone. But if I, as a consulting herald, understand these rules, I can help them understand and help them to correct their arrangement so that
Mhm.
instead of saying you can't do that, we can say, well, what if we just tweak it a little bit and go this way, you know?
Mhm.
And that will help. Exactly, it's all in the approach. And so if we can approach them with an understanding of these rules, then we can also work within the rules to help people essentially get what they want, even if they don't get it exactly as they want.
I agree with you totally. Okay, we're gonna start playing with numbers. Okay, numbers we're actually not working with Laurel decisions as far as primary charges are concerned. I'm sorry, need to back up. We're only talking about the numbers in a secondary charge group. If you know a lot about heraldry, you get kind of questions as what the change of number for peripheral charges are because it isn't intuitive. Arranged charges, the number of overall charges, and the number of tertiary charges, whether it's on the primary, the secondary, or on the overall charge. And then technical disclaimer about maintaining quaternary. For example, this is a peripheral charge known as a point or a pile. In the case of Bassett, we have changed from 3 piles arranged what's called in point to 4 piles arranged in joint. Again, we're changing from 3 to more than 3. So this is a cadency change from these two airs. Change the number from the arranged charges is a lot easier to visualize when you have, for example, the chevron between 3 lion's heads as opposed to a chevron between only 2 lion's head. Notice both of those are in the top. Case of Thornberry, we have some where we have a white field, we have a yellow chief. People in the Middle Ages did not care about our contrast rules. White with yellow chief, blue lion, and we had one bend. Zare, on the other hand, said, no, I don't want one bend. I'm going to differentiate myself by 2. So you have a changed number from one of the 2, in this case, of secondary or of overall charges. Similarly, if we have tertiary, whether it's on the primary, we have the primary charge, 3 arranged secondary charges, and then on the tertiary, on the primary, we have changing a number from 2 to 3. Same in the case of Fitzbernard and tertiary on the peripheral charge, we have 2 mullets to 3 mullets, changing from 2 to 3 is distinct change because these 2 people were related. Similarly, on the case again of Cornwall, white line, and by now we should all know this little luck bend and 3 yellow dots. And this particular error went from 3 yellow dots to 5. Again, related families, this changed to number, although it's apparent to the modern eye, these 2 people were related. Now, this type of change for the change of number is fairly recent as far as primary charge is concerned, and it only occurred about 3% of the time in the 4,200 examples that I compiled. Any questions about changing numbers in the charge group, whether it's secondary, overall, or tertiary?
Nope.
Okay. Going to change of arrangement in the charge group. It is possible to have a change arrangement as a distinct change as primary charge. So we're going to talk about the specific instance where that happens. Secondary charge group, you cannot rearrange a peripheral charge. If you rearrange a peripheral charge, it becomes a different type of peripheral charge. But you can do the discrete charges. You can do an arrangement with overall charges. And then you can do a different arrangement on tertiary charges, whether on the primary, on the secondary, or on the overall. We're not talking about maintaining and quaternary. They didn't actually happen. The only time that a primary charge is just distinct change is when you have what's called an unforced change of placement. Okay, for example, in the case of Skipworth, this is a neutral field. The standing dog is over the entire field. But an heir said, no, I only want it on the upper half. This is an unforced change of placement called enhanced. And these two people were obviously related. And so this is considered confusion of relationship with one distinct change. In the case of Montfort's, had blue lion, red crosses in the background. We had lots of them all scattered all over the place. And then an heir said, I want these to arrange in a nice teeny tiny little pattern all the way around the perimeter. This is called arranged to something in oral. The only difference between this and the heir is the arrangement of the arrangeable charges. And this is another one where, again, I apologize for very poor graphics. In the case of Gibbon, where we had a lion and then we had two boar spears crossed in saltire overall. And this, like we were talking about the primary charge, one had it over there, so it did not touch the edges of the shield. And then an heir said, no, I want them issuing out of the edge of the field. The only difference is the change of arrangement from in the middle to a based. This is a confusion of a relationship. Like we had the arranged charges around a primary charge. We have, in the case of Lindsay, where we had a group of summé of charges on an eagle, as opposed to an heir that said, I'm taking those charges and I'm making them into the pattern of a cross. Confusion of relationship in the Middle Ages. And then yet another one where I owe very big apologies on this one. Both of these are demi-lines. On this particular one, I should have drawn it much smaller so you could see that it actually isn't touching the bottom line. It's actually discrete charge. As opposed to this one, it is actually issuing out of the line division. This is a change of relationship. One is coming out and the other is firmly on there. And this is considered, as small as difference as it is a distinct change. And I did not find any historical examples at all of a change to arrangement on an overall charge. This is the type of thing that the SCA allows on an overall charge, where we have a mixed charge group. So we could say that the middle is different from the two outers, and reversing them is a change, but I could find no historical evidence for that. And again, very little times that did not happen terribly frequent in the Middle Ages, only about 2%. Are there any questions about change of arrangement, whether something is enhanced, they're arranged into a pattern, or changing items? Okay. The only thing we're reducing now is change to posture or orientation. Again, we have a special case as far as the primary charge group is concerned, called either conturny or inverted, which is either flipped upside down or facing the opposite direction. Again, we cannot have a change to posture in a peripheral charge group because, well, when you flip it around, it looks precisely the same thing as it is. It doesn't work. But arrangeable to discrete charges is possible. In overall charges, it's possible. In tertiary, whether on the primary, the secondary, or the overall charge, is possible. So, for example, in the case of Holland, we had England, which is red, 3 yellow lions, passant garden. And then the heir, married to the heir, she simply reversed the orientation of the lions, going from standard facing to conturny reversed is a change of relationship and confusion of relationship. Similarly, with secondary charges, we had the case of Baron, black, thou cross, three hands. And this is, we've got the default orientation straight up and down, as opposed to an heir who had them going bendwise. Okay. Change of orientation from straight to bendwise, change of relationship. And in the case of the overall charge, with the case of Hastings, where we had red, a blue chief. In one case, we had a fighting lion, and in the second case, we had a walking lion. The only difference was the change of the posture of the overall charge. In case of tertiary charges on the primary, we have a type of charge called levered Jacint de Lis, which is a lion's head with a sphere sticking through it with the shape of a fleur de lis. So we had three of them going that, and then in this case with gray, they were inverted. In the case of M coats, when we're getting into tertiary charges, we're talking small things. So here we had the same primary charge of three covered cups, a chief. We had a castle, and between the castle were two fighting lions, as opposed to a sun, which had a castle between two walking lions. The only difference was changed to half of the tertiary charge group on the secondary, going from fighting to walking. In the case of overall charges, in the case of Lancaster, we had three bars and we had a red canton. In one, we had a walking lion, and the other had a fighting lion. The only difference was the change from posture of the lions of the tertiary on the overall charge. This occurred actually in only about 1% of the instances of the ones that I did. Are there any questions on a DC for changed posture in the charge group?
No.
Okay. Nobody cares about statistics, but we'll skip it. Okay, let's do an exercise to show it is what we've learned. I wanted to try and devise a device that I thought would clear. So I did, rather than three lions or one lion, I did two lions because two lions is the least number registered. And I had a chief, and I said, okay, I'm going to do a bend to give an overall charge. But somebody, let's say somebody had this particular one, and the only difference I have is the bend. What types of second changes can I make in order to make this clear from this particular device? It may add conflict with other ones, but clear this one. Well, with the Middle Ages, we could change the tincture of the field. We could add a charge on there, but that adds to complexity, and let's try and keep things as simple as possible. We could change the tincture of a charge, but since what we want is a red lion, let's say we can only change either this or this. We could change the type of a charge. We could change the arrangement of the charges. We're not going to do the change the number of charges because that's a substantial change, or changing to a posture. So we could change the tincture of the field. So we have one DC for the addition of the sub of the overall charge, and we got our second DC from changing the tincture of the field. Or we could change the tincture of the charge. We get one DC for addition of the overall charge, a second DC for changing the tincture to half of the peripheral charge. Or we could change the type of a charge. We get one DC for addition of the bend, and a second DC for changing the type of the chief from a straight line to an engrailed line. Or for posture, we could do the line passant, counter passant. And I also changed the type of overall on this one, so I could increase identifiability. It doesn't matter because I'm still just adding an overall charge. And the second charge change is changing posture from 2 lines passant to a line passant and a line counter passant. Does that type of thing help anybody? Any questions?
Can you
Yes,
change the position?
Yes, I could change the position or orientation of both of them. However, when I was playing around, that one just simply looked cool to my eye. So I figured I'd throw that one in. Yes, I could reverse both of them at the same time, but the rule says I could only have to change at least half. And that one, I was actually able to get 2 identifiable lines. But both of them are possible, and your submitter may prefer one over the other. Does that make sense? I greatly appreciate everybody's time and attention. Are there any questions as to what it was that we've been going over?
I
Ms.
don't
Jessamine?
have a question, but reiterating what others have said, I had only ever thought of cadency with the one that you said was the eldest son, or sometimes like the charged. I didn't understand that there were so many in period variations to cadency. So it helps me to explain to someone when you only have one DC that we need 2, because in period, essentially one DC is claiming that you were either a child of or a close relative of this person, and we don't want to presume that. And I think
Yes,
a lot of
when
people
we
get
ask,
frustrated.
yeah, when we ask for permission to conflict, what we're actually asking for is to be their relative.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
something I never realized. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. 2 triquetras. Okay. Triquetras with the points to center. The problem with geometric type figures is that sometimes things look identical upside down, and at other times they are considered unidentifiable. For example, we have rules that say you can't have an animal that is upside down unless there's one particular arrangement. Then we had, for example, Justman caught me on roses that were upside down. Well, a rose upside down and a rose right side up look almost precisely the same. There's a difference to the modern eye, but in the period eye, it was totally different. And I believe that in the case of a triquetra, the same case is true. I could be wrong, but I believe that's probably why the ruling was the way it was. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, Gira, Gita, on a lot of these, it depends on individual things as whether or not they were found in heraldry or not. A triquetra, yes, it was a charge. It wasn't that frequently used of a charge. So a lot of people go through and try and find the examples they have in rolls of arms to see what it was they were actually looked at and what the depictions was. It's bizarre, but pillows have 2 different directions on them. Mostly they're going rectangular, and then a couple of them, they're arranged in what is called lozenge-wise, where they're actually set over on the diagonal. But things like that aren't terribly rare. Aren't terribly common. Yes, pillows, little tassels on the end. Oh, trust me, it was new for me too. I learned what a chevron and a half was. I've learned what a what was it? 2 pallets toggled bendwise was. And I've learned a couple other things, asking questions, things that I found out with Blazons and had no clue what it was. And other people were like going through, okay, let me see if I can figure it out. Let me see if I can figure it out, until one person finally said, aha, found it, here at last. Okay. I greatly appreciate your being here, and I would greatly appreciate your further input. This class is designed to be the basis for teaching Armory education on the Tincture College of Heralds website. I would greatly appreciate you telling me what worked, and more especially what didn't, with suggestions how to improve it. At the very beginning of the chat, you will find my email address, lojosephy@yahoo.com. I also do the same address as lojosephy@gmail.com, but everything gets forwards to the Yahoo one. The slides are available as long as the Google link actually works. If you please take it, feel free to comment on it and write all over it. It is not considered bullying when you tear me to shreds. This is an educational in this one. Okay, thank you, Jessamine. All right, any questions? All right, I thank you very much for your time. I thank you very much for your attention. Again, welcome to King's College. And if nobody else has any questions, we're going to stop recording. Again, thank you for attending, and I look forward to your comments. Thank you very much. Hi, Rhiannon, could you stop recording, please? Thank you.
I said you have one joining.
Hi, Robin. Sorry we missed you.